There's a really bad shadow right there.
That's okay.
Too bad. Hey, what's up? I'm Andy.
I'm Jen.
And today we're going to talk about stuff.
Kids and what they do to your life.
Well,
just kidding.
What we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about how to prioritize your relationship first and have your kids remain in that second spot. And we did not do this perfectly. So I'm going to say that right at the beginning. There's a couple things that we did that were right and a couple things that we did not do that we had to go course correct. And Jen's going to kick us off today.
Okay. So at the very beginning when we decided to have kids and we had these expectations of where they were going to stay and where they weren't going to stay. I think the biggest thing we did to help our relationship was to keep our room our room. It's very easy to fall into that snuggle trap where they're so sweet and they smell so good and those snuggles are so awesome. But one of the things that we found was huge for protecting our space was making sure that the kids knew that their room was their room and our room was our room, because otherwise we didn't have that
it was our room first.
Well, yeah, it was.
It was our room first, and then for how long did we have the kids in a room though? Because you're like breastfeeding and that kind of stuff. How long was that?
Probably around 6 months.
Yeah.
And then when it was that training time for, making sure that they were sleeping through the night, we transitioned them into their own rooms. But in that, like once they were old enough to realize they were in their own space, they were toddlers, they were starting to climb out of their crib and that kind of thing. Like once they started pushing the limits, one of the things we did that I actually found truly helped set proper boundaries for them and for us. And I know this isn't for everybody. This is just us. This is our family.
This was our thing. That's it.
Yeah, but it really did help us keep that space our space. So we would put baby gates in their doorway and tell them, okay, you are not allowed to come in here until the sun rises. There's a certain number on the clock. You know what that is. And they were old enough to understand what that was. Yeah. And it helped them respect what our space is. And to this day, we have a 14, 12, and 9-year-old. To this day, no joke, our room is still our room.
Our room is our room. And the exception to that, I mean, we have to talk about that for a second. The exception to that is when there's a kid that's sick, first of all.
Yes.
So breastfeeding is number one exception. And then also when someone's sick, like it's just easier that they're in your room sometimes. Yeah. And so when the kids were really, really little, we did that. But we didn't make it a habit of the kids sharing our bed with us when they were 1 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old still. Like that's our bed. We needed rest because our relationship needed us to be at our best. And we're not at our best if we're missing rest and our kid has an empty bed down the hall that they could be sleeping in. So that was just kind of the truth of it for us.
And our kids sleep like tornadoes, so...
There's no sleep when there's a third person in your bed and they're a little kid. Yeah. So at the right age when they knew what time was, it's like stay in your room until that time and then you can come in and hang out afterwards.
Right.
Yep.
And so we kind of build in other times that we have communal time. Like one of the spaces that I know is important for me that I grew up with I have 2 sisters, and so we would always gather in the master bathroom at my parents' house with my mom whenever she would be doing her makeup, and that was kind of our communal time. That's where we talked and we were silly together. We created different areas and different time frames that really allowed that fun to happen without it invading and intruding on my parents' space.
And we do that now. I mean, when Jen's getting ready in the morning, oftentimes there's 1 and sometimes 2 and 3 girls in the room, all getting together, getting ready, and then I just kind of take my stuff and go change some clothes.
And I find that precious. So make your...
It's so precious.
Make your space for you and your husband or you and your wife, and create a really cool communal time for you and your kids to have that together. But this was just something that we chose to do to protect our time together. And another thing we found that years ago, 12 years ago, in fact, when we were part of our first small group, it was a couple small group through church. One of the other really great things that we were given advice on was to create what was called couch time. So when the kids are asleep, for us, it was usually at the end of the day, the kids are asleep, everything is kind of done and shut down for the night, we would come together and sit on the couch and follow up with each other. How was your day?
Yeah.
What was the good point? What was the bad point? Highs, lows, whatever. And then discuss what needed to happen, whatever.
And also during times of your life where you're actually intentionally working on your relationship, that's a good time to have where it's uninterrupted or mostly uninterrupted, because typically you're done with the work day, you've finished all your household chores, and the kids are in bed, and you can actually sit down and have some time. Now, the other definition of couch time is right when you come home, the first 5 minutes, you get caught up with one another. What's going on? How is the house? How is day? Right. What do I need to know coming into the environment as a dad? What do I need to know in order to meet my partner where she's at and understand what I need to do to carry out my part of the evening to support what she has done during the day without messing that up? Now, I was terrible at that for a long time. And then we had to put a lot of work into that. So it's kind of a both and when we talk about couch time. It's after everyone's to bed, let's talk about the stuff we need to talk about. But right when I come home, get me up to speed so I can figure out where to fit in and help carry out the rest of the evening easily.
And that looks very different in each of the seasons. Like when the girls were little, having him jump into anything we were doing was actually really overwhelming for me, because I didn't really know how to pass the baton, because I am a stay-at-home mom. And so the girls and I had a very good routine in the way we worked together. They knew me, I knew them, and he would try and come in, and it threw us off, and it bothered him a lot. So that leads me to what I'd like him to add into next. Let me finish that point. Couch time was figuring out how he should move in the stages that we were in with the littles, where he was saying he was really bad at that, and I was really bad at trying to communicate that with you. I don't think I knew how to communicate that to you, my wants. So, right. I mean, for those of you...
We had to work at that a lot. That took a lot of effort.
Right. And so I think that's our encouragement as well, is if you are really struggling with that, our encouragement to you, right, you're not alone in it, but also really fight for that communication, because if you fight for that, counseling is huge. We've been to counseling, I don't know how many times, and it was a godsend. It really, really helped us figure out how to communicate through each of the seasons, because we both needed something so different in each of the seasons of the kids. Yeah. So couch time for us was different in helping us figure out how we even communicate through each stage of the kids' lives. And then couch time sometimes was just a date night trying to go out to coffee and then figuring out how not to talk about the kids. Yeah. So that's different for everybody, but we just want to encourage you to really fight for figuring that out.
So,
but going into what I know Andy struggled with when we were in the early stages of raising our kids, it was really difficult for him to not be needed in the first section of our raising littles, because they were infant to toddlers for a pretty good season, and he felt like he didn't know what to do. So I'd like you to actually speak on that and what you would encourage other men to do.
Well, there's two parts of that. So we're talking about how to keep the relationship in first place, and that requires intentionality, time, and sometimes scheduling. Mm-hmm. And so the negative impact of the relationship being second place to the kids is when you're a dad and they only need mom, it's a further blow to your self-relevance. And that sounds like so pitiful. But what I really mean is, like, I want to be a supportive husband. I want to be an engaged and loving father. But the kids don't need me. I don't feed them. They don't spend all day with me. They're not looking to me for anything. And so it was difficult because in my mind, I know, they need mom because mom is the supplier of food and vitality for them. And they spend all day with mom. But in my heart, I was like, man, it was just crushing me that I want to spend so much time with my kids and my girls, but they could care less.
I Hold on though, I really want to point out that they did need him. They just needed him in a different way.
Ways,
and we really struggled. I know I really struggled with this in trying to help him come into that position where the girls and I had our way and we rolled with that way. And so I just kind of went with it, and I was exhausted. I was burnt out, and I didn't really know how to let him have any of that peace, because we sailed really smoothly together, the girls and I did. But when he would try and come in, no, I got my way. And I struggled with that. So allowing him to actually be dad in the way that he was dad, I sucked at that. I did not know how to let him be him while entering what we created in our world. So he was absolutely needed, but we didn't know how to actually allow him to have that space. Neither one of us knew how to add him into that space.
Yeah, we were like floundering through that time. That was difficult. So in those times of trying to battle feeling relevant or useful at all to the kids, it took actually special effort to go, okay, well then how do I purposefully keep our relationship at the level it's supposed to be? And we didn't do that very well for a long time, because like, fine, then we're just going to go through this season the way it is. And I'm not sure, looking back, if that was right or wrong. It's just what it was. But it was difficult for us to reprioritize our relationship. And it was only when things got bad that we're like, oh shoot, we had deprioritized it and we allowed it to slip into that second place. And then we had to fight to put it back in the first place. And then that looked like things like having more clear and consistent communication, even being honest. And I don't mean that we were being dishonest, but like when you fail to tell the whole truth about how you feel, you're leaving out some of what's really going on. And so I'd pretend like, oh no, it's fine, but it wasn't fine. And then, oh no, it's okay, I got it, but I'm like, man, I don't want to get it. And so it was this cover up season of like pretending, really, and that hurt our relationship. We had to get through that, and once we reprioritized us, we had to work through that, and that took a lot of effort.
Yeah, and like our backpedaling and trying to work through resentment and bitterness, because I enabled certain things that, made him walk in certain ways, and he allowed certain things that when I said I got it, he was like, okay, well, I guess she's got it. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm exhausted walking around like a zombie because I'm breastfeeding littles for how many years? Yeah. And, not really allowing you to have a place in that. So,
I think what I hear you is saying is like, man, we were both super stubborn. We're still stubborn, but in much different ways, and not as stubborn as we used to be.
Yeah, but that's accurate.
But that's what it was. Yes, it was just plain stubbornness.
Stubbornness and pride were huge. So if you're struggling with that, welcome. But I mean, be smarter than we were, and do yourself a favor. If you really are having trouble getting past that, I hope you do yourself a favor and get to counseling, because it will really help you communicate better and realize that you're not alone in this, and you have a partner for a reason. It's so much smoother when you do.
I want to share the two questions I think that helped us start having some of those conversations and reprioritize our relationship, and gain back us in the middle of all that. The first question is, what do you want that you're not currently getting? And answering that for ourselves and answering that to each other. What is it that you want that you're not currently getting? And then what are you getting that you don't want? Yeah. And those two questions took us back. I'm like, man, oh my gosh. These lists have all these answers underneath them. And when we became super honest about that, and then we each addressed those questions to one another, that's when we started to be able to form how keeping our relationship number one was going to look like and what we'd have to do in order to get there.
Right. And I think another thing for us as well, from my perspective, was surrounding ourselves with men and women who could speak into our lives that have already gone through it. Those seasons that can encourage us through it, can say, hey, this worked for us, this didn't work for us. I think that in those seasons where you feel so alone, it's easy to think that you're the only one going through it.
and
you're
to feel
not.
defeated.
Yeah, you're not alone. And there are so many people that are actually for you. You just gotta reach out and let people know, hey, I'm struggling. I need prayer. I need guidance.
And I think something we realized is like, and being the ages we are now, like at some point, every relationship we've known that's been together for a long time, they've gone through this.
Right.
It's just a matter of whether they've talked about it or not. Mm-hmm. So, and not that they have talked about it with us, but everyone's going through something like this at some point in their life when they got kids. And it's just usually a matter of whether they've talked about it or not and shared that with us. But what we've learned is that most people we have this conversation with, they relate to it at some level. Yeah.
Yep. So I think the other thing that I probably, the last thing we really need to touch on is where you involve dating with each other, and couch time is part of that, but it's the dating in the midst of kids is not only a wonderful thing for you to keep that flame alive, the kids tend to feel safer. I've noticed, like, when I say, hey, I'm going on a date with your dad, and bye, y'all, we love you, but, like, they kind of get a little giddy and are happy for us because they know we're safe.
Yeah.
When we're safe, they're safe.
Yeah.
They act differently. They act happy about it. So I think that's something that was really eye-opening for me when they were a lot younger. I'm like, oh, I can't leave them, they're babies. And that hurt us a lot because I know I'm not the only one, but I knew it was hard for me to leave the kids. And then thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know him right now. Like, I don't. He had his own world. I had my own world with the girls. And that, I was afraid of that for a long time. But having fought for that time, it made me realize how many times I've thought of the fact that, like, when the kids are gone and they will leave the house at some point, I have to know my husband. And if I don't know my husband, I'm up the creek because he's what I've got and I'm what he's got. And it's going to take a lot more work to get to know each other after the fact if we don't put that work in now.
I wanted to share something about, like, how I view us dating now, and even before too. Is like, I think it's a lot of fun because I like going to do things that I like to go do with Jen. And she likes to go do certain things and go to certain places, and let's be frank here, eat at certain places. And so I want to be that husband that takes my wife to the place she likes to eat at, which makes her happy. And I want to go out and do things that I like to do with my wife. And when we do that, it reminds us, like, hey, we can still have fun together. And honestly, if you're working your butt off at work, both of you or one of you, and both of you are working your butt off at home or one of you, like, you honestly owe it to yourself to go and enjoy some part of your relationship in your life. Because if you don't, what you're really banking on is that you're going to exhaust all your emotional self, physical self, and mental self without restoring anything into each other and your relationship, and you're hoping that it's all going to work out. And it's not going to go down like that. It just doesn't. We have to go do these things because it brings fullness back to us, and we get to enjoy our time together the way it was before we had those precious little kids.
He's right on. And the thing I want to also add is he's saying this because we've walked down those streets in a wrong way. We have spent so long doing the things that were not helpful, doing the things that were unhealthy, doing the things that caused us to be crying on a counselor's couch because we didn't know what we were doing. Can
I tell a story?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so, I just remember there's this one time, sometimes when you haven't gone out and dated in a long time, you sit at a table across from each other and you don't know what to talk about. That happened to us. Yeah, and you don't know what to say, and you're just like, So instead of saying, like, oh, that really sucks and that was terrible, we were kind of like, it's a start. This is where we're starting from. Okay, well, now let's build upon that and let's make that building block. So even though it was a silent dinner, we still had dinner together, and we were like, okay, that's the baseline. This is what our life really is like. Now we know. Now let's move on from there. Yeah. See? Harmless little story.
Harmless.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, so at this point in our lives, we are now in a place, and again, it took us pretty much our entire marriage to get to this place. No, I don't mean in the sense that like we haven't learned a lot. I mean in the sense that like really up until this year, and this is our 16th year of marriage together, it took us the entire time, every single year of our marriage, we have been chopping away at breaking off the junk that has caused us to
be stuck.
Be stuck, yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the middle of it, we've been there. If you're not sure how to get out of it, we've been there. Like, seriously, go to counseling. I'm not kidding. With best investment. But in the wrapping of it up, date your spouse. 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 I cannot say it enough. Mm-hmm. They were your best friend before the kid came. They were the best friend before the next kid came. They were the best friend before the other one came. Make sure they're your best friend. Always. Like, we have gone through seasons where we've not liked each other too much. Because we just tried to do it our own way, and our own way didn't work. So remember, I guess my questions that I have a couple questions I want to challenge you with is, if you're in the middle of a season where your kids kind of rule the roost, because life is busy and it's easiest to do that way, it just kind of falls into it and it happens, and you would like to really get back to where you started, I think the biggest question, somebody asked me, I don't even know who did, what is it that you fell in love with in your spouse, and what is it that you still are in love with that you've kind of, it's where they've been from the beginning, but they've even grown even more so in that area. Like, what are those things that are so attractive to you about your spouse? I know we change over each season. There are the things you fell in love with, and then there's those things that they've changed and they've grown into. You have to make a list of those things, because that's what
to remind yourself.
You really have to remind yourself, because otherwise you become roommates and you kind of go through the day when you're off to work and you are doing kid runarounds, you're a taxi driver, and then you just forget to reconnect. So reconnect. What did you fall in love with? What are you still in love with? What do you want to get to know about your spouse? Those are really important things to reattach yourself to emotionally. So with that, we'll close out. But thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for letting us be honest with you and letting us put ourselves out there in a way that, like, we're not perfect. We are far from it. We're still learning and growing and trying to figure this whole thing out as each season comes. It's a difficult thing to be parents and married and, do life and keep the flame lit. It's tough. So we want to encourage you to keep fighting for your marriage to be healthy and to put God at your center, because quite honestly, when we take him out of it, it ain't that good.
You're not giving yourself a good chance.
No. And if there's anything that you guys do want us to hit on that maybe you're going through and need to know if we've gone through it, then please leave us a message, private message us, or
just ask. We'll talk about everything we want to talk about.
Yeah.
and nothing we don't want to talk about.
So thank you for joining us. That's it for now, and we'll just see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for watching. Man, did you hear George the whole time?
I did. He's such a punk.
Man, maybe we should talk about having animals interrupt you.
I don't want to.
We need to have we need to keep our room from our dog now.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, she's barking.